Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. A very warm welcome to this Monday, 8th May 2023 morning Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam discussion. Today we are reading from Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Canto 2, entitled The Cosmic Manifestation, Chapter 7, Text 42. Before we discuss on this verse, let's sing Jai Radha Madhav. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari, Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari, Yashodanandana Rajajana Ranjana, Yashodanandana Rajajana Ranjana, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari, Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari, Yashodanandana Rajajana Ranjana, Yashodanandana Rajajana Ranjana, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari, Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari, Yashodanandana Rajajana Ranjana, Yashodanandana Rajajana Ranjana, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Radha Govinda, Radha Govinda, Radha Govinda, Shri Radhe. Jai Radha Govinda, Radha Govinda, Radha Govinda, Shri Radhe. Jai Nitai Sachinandana Gaura Hari, Nitai Sachinandana Gaura Hari, Jaya Nitai Sachinandana Gaura Hari, Nitai Sachinandana Gaura Hari, Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura, Hari Bol. जय ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस परविजाकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर शतऋषि श्रीमद हिज डिवाइन ग्रेस श्रीला इसी भक्तिवेदांत स्वामी प्रभुपाद की जय, अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय, नामाचार्य श्रीला हरिदास ठाकुर की जय, प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद की जय। श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोप गोपीनाथ श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड गिरि गोवर्धन की जय। वृंदावन धाम की जय, मथुरा धाम की जय, जगन्नाथपुरी धाम की जय, मायापुर धाम की जय, गंगा माई की जय, यमुना माई की जय, तुलसी देवी की जय, भक्ति देवी की जय, सामवेद भक्त वृंद की जय। All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to Shri Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Niti Namine. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Sarvam Shri Krishna Arpanamastu. Krishne Matirastu. Hare Krishna. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 7, Text 42. yeṣāṁ bhagavān dayayed anantaḥ sarvātmanāśrita-pado yadi nirvyalīkam te dustarām atitaranti ca deva-māyāṁ naiṣāṁ mamāham dhīḥ śva-śṛgāla-bhakṣye yeṣāṁ sa eṣa bhagavān dayayed anantaḥ sarvātmanāśrita-pado yadi nirvyalīkam te dustarām atitaranti ca deva-māyāṁ naiṣāṁ mamāham dhīḥ śva-śṛgāla-bhakṣye yeṣāṁ sa eṣa bhagavān dayayed anantaḥ sarvātmanāśrita-pado yadi nirvyalīkam te dustarām atitaranti ca deva-māyāṁ naiṣāṁ mamāham dhīḥ śva-śṛgāla-bhakṣye. Synonyms: yeṣāṁ, onto those only, saha, the Lord, eshaha, the bhagavān, the personality of Godhead, dayayed, does bestow his mercy, anantaḥ, the unlimited potency, sarvātmanā, by all means, without reservation, ashrita-padah, surrendered soul, yadi, if such surrender, nirvyalīkam, without pretension, te, those only, dustarām, insurmountable, atitaranti, can overcome, cha, and the paraphernalia, deva-māyāṁ, diverse energies of the Lord, na, not, yeṣāṁ, of them, mama, mine, aham, myself, iti, thus, dhīḥ, conscious, śva, dog, śrigala, jackals, bhakṣye, in the matter of eating. Translation: but anyone who is specifically favored by the Lord, the personality of Godhead, due to unalloyed surrender onto the service of the Lord, can overcome the insurmountable ocean of illusion and can understand the Lord. But those who are attached to this body, which is meant to be eaten at the end by dogs and jackals, cannot do so. Purport by His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada ki Jai. The unalloyed devotees of the Lord know the glories of the Lord in the sense that they can understand how great the Lord is and how great is his expansion of diverse energy. Those who are attached to the perishable body can hardly enter into the realm of the signs of Godhead. The whole materialistic world, based on the conception of the material body as a self, is ignorant of the signs of God. The materialist is always busy working for the welfare of the material body, not only his own, but also those of his children, kinsmen, community men, countrymen, etc. The materialists have many branches of philanthropic and altruistic activities from a political, national, and international angle of vision, but none of the field work can go beyond the jurisdiction of the misconception of identifying the material body with the spirit soul. Unless, therefore, one is saved from the wrong conception of the body and the soul, there is no knowledge of Godhead. And unless there is knowledge of God, all advancement of material civilization, however dazzling, should be considered a failure. Before we discuss on this verse, let us offer some prayers. Om Jnanatimmirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Namashrestham Manamapi Shachiputram Atra Swarupam Rupam Tasyagrajam Murupurim Mathurim Goshthavati Radha Kundam Girivaram Maho Radhika Madhavasham Prapto Yasya Pratita Kripaya Shri Gurum Tam Natosmi Vandeham Shri Gurum Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha Adadandastrinam Dante Idam Yachaha Punaha Punaha Shriman Rupa Padam Bhojam Dhulisyam Janma Janmani He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesh Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vancha Kalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 7, Text 42. Yeṣāṁ sa eṣa bhagavān dayayed anantaḥ sarvātmanāśrita-pado yadi nirvyalīkam te dustarām atitaranti ca deva-māyāṁ naiṣāṁ mamāham iti dhīḥ śva-śṛgāla-bhakṣye. But anyone who is specifically favored by the Supreme Lord, the Personality of Godhead, due to unalloyed surrender onto the service of the Lord, can overcome the insurmountable ocean of illusion and can understand the Lord. But those who are attached to this body, which is meant to be eaten at the end by dogs and jackals, cannot do so. This is those wonderful transcendental divine verses of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, where the glorification of Krishna is very beautifully done. So in this verse, if we try and understand this verse, each line by line, let us first understand yeṣāṁ sa eṣa bhagavān dayayed anantaḥ. Beautiful words here. So dayayed anantaḥ. This is, if you look at that, bhagavān dayayed anantaḥ. So the Supreme Personality of Godhead is called Bhagavan, one who possesses all opulences. Bhoktaram yagyatapasam sarvaloka maheshwaram suhridam sarvabhutanam gyatva mam shanti mruchati. As Krishna mentions in Bhagavad Gita, when one understands that Krishna is actual enjoyer of all the penances, austerities, and sacrifices that anyone does, Bhoktaram yagyatapasam sarvaloka maheshwar, that Krishna is the actual proprietor of the whole unlimited universes. So the science is trying to discover a lot of things with all the modern equipments that we have, telescopes. With telescope and with all the satellites and everything else, one is trying to explore the outer universe. And with instruments like microscope and all the other instruments which try to go into the minuteness of the creation. So there is the vastness of the creation, which is just there is no end to that vastness. One tries to discover the Milky Way And then one sees that there are innumerable such galaxies. And it is like, if you look at if you go to a beach and if you look at the sands, the minute sands that are there, the universe is similar to that. Innumerable galaxies. So the Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, is Sarva-loka Maheshwaram. He is the proprietor of all those universes. Suhridam sarva-bhutanam. And he's the best friend of all the living entities. So this is the costless mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It cannot be fathomed by the material mind. So this is, it is the Supreme Personality of Godhead is, there is no end to his glories. Anantaḥ. That is what is meant by anantaḥ. One can, so it is mentioned in the scriptures that the Sheshashai, the thousand-hood serpent on which Mahavishnu is lying, he can continuously glorify the Supreme Personality of Godhead for immortality without any end, and still he will not be able to complete the glorification of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this is the greatness of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And when one understands this, so this is, as Krishna says, aham sarvasya prabhaho matta sarvam pravartate iti matva bhajante mam buddha bhava samanvita. As Krishna mentions in Bhagavad Gita, when one understands that Krishna is the cause of everything is emanating from him. Matta sarvam pravartate. When one knows this in truth, iti matva bhajante mam. What does a person do? One starts rendering loving devotional service to Krishna. And how does one render such a loving devotional service? Bhava samanvita, with full emotion, because it is only the emotion that the living entity can give to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There is nothing else that the living entity can give. Therefore, it is said, bhava grahi janardana. Murkham vadanti vishnaya, dhiram vadati vishnave. Ubhaya cha samam punyam bhava grahi janardana. So it is mentioned in the scriptures that someone who is not well versed in saying the Vedic verses, which are mainly based in Sanskrit, might say Om Vishnaya Namaha. Instead of saying Om Vishnave Namaha, the correct way of saying is Om Vishnave Namaha. But someone might say, without knowing the Sanskrit, they might just say Om Vishnaya Namaha. So that particular verse is saying that someone might say in the correct way as Om Vishnave Namaha, or someone might say in the wrong way as Om Vishnaya Namaha. But Ubhaya cha samam punyam. Both of them will get the same benefit of saying the name of the Lord, even though one says it incorrectly. Why? Because Bhava Grahi Janardana. Because Krishna is not, he is not after someone doing everything like in terms of pronunciation and everything else. Of course, it is very important that all those aspects are right as well, but it is not the goal. The goal is how much surrender one has to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. How much one can understand that actually it is the Supreme Personality of Godhead who is controlling me. So if one can nimitta matram bhava savyasachi, as Krishna mentions in Bhagavad Gita, tasmat tvam yuddha yasho labhasva jitva shatrum bhuntva rajyam samrudram maya vaita vihitena purvam evahi nimitta matram bhava savyasachi. So Krishna says to Arjuna that, oh Arjuna, you just become my instrument. And if someone can very clearly understand that every moment Krishna is using me as an instrument, if one has got that frame of mind, then one is in that total surrender. So yeṣāṁ tu antagatam papam jananam punya karmanam te dvandva moha vinirmukta bhajante mam dhridavrata. As Krishna mentions in Bhagavad Gita, who engages in Krishna's loving devotional service with total determination, full determination. So there Krishna says yeṣāṁ tu antagatam papam. So one who has stopped doing sinful activities. Jananam punya karmanam, and one who has started doing pious activities continuously. Te dvandva moha vinirmukta bhajante mam dodhavrata. Such a person becomes free from the dualities of material nature and the attachment to the material nature. Te dvandva moha vinirmukta bhajante mam dodhavrata. And in such a state, in such a condition, one engages in my devotional service with full determination. So this is the beginning, is the understanding that everything belongs to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Ishavasyam idam sarvam yat kincham jagatyam jagat tena tyaktena bhunjitha ma gridha kasya svidhanam. As it is mentioned in Sri Yushopanishad, that everything belongs to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Ishavasyam idam sarvam yat kincham jagatyam jagat. And when one knows this, then there is this yeṣāṁ. So when one is totally surrendered onto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in that state of mind, one is seeing the Lord everywhere. Yomam pashyati sarvatra sarvam cha mai pashyati tasya hamna pranashyami sacha mena pranashyati. So one sees with the vision that everything is coming from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So it is his possession. Everything is his possession. So Krishna mentions in Bhagavad Gita, Bhumirapa analo vayu khammana buddhirevacha ahankaram itiyam me bhinna prakritir ashtadha. So Krishna says that I have got 8 separated energies. So that is bhinna prakriti. So there is earth, water, fire, air, space, and then mind, intelligence, and false ego. So Krishna says these are my bhinna prakriti, ashtadha, the 8 types of my differentiated energies. Then Krishna says, apareyam mitastu anyam vidhi me prakritim param jiva bhutam mahabaho yayedam dharyate jagat. Krishna says that these are my 8 separated energies, but there is a superior energy to all these 8 separated inferior energies, and that is the living entities. The jiva bhutam mahabaho yayedam dharyate jagat. Because the living entities are, and especially in the human form of life. Therefore, Srila Prahlad Maharaj says, Kaumaram acharet prajñam dharman bhagavātāniha durlabham manusham janmam tadapi adhruvam artada. So we have recently, we have the wonderful auspicious occasion of Narasimha Jayanti. And Narasimha Jayanti is a wonderful festival where one understands that how total unalloyed loving devotional service of the Lord can directly bring the Lord physically in his original form. So that is the power of loving devotional service to the Lord. And that is that wonderful verse that Sri Prahlad Maharaj says. He says that the engagement in loving devotional service to the Lord should start from childhood itself. Kaumaram acharet prajña dharman bhagavatāniha, the Bhagavata dharma. What is the Bhagavata dharma? Bhagavata dharma is Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnum, Smaranam, Padasevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atmanivedanam. Again said by Prahlad Maharaj. So he says, what are the different ways in which one can engage oneself in loving devotional service of the Lord? So that is Hrishikena Hrishikesha Sevanam Bhakti Ruchyate. When the senses are engaged in the service of the master of the senses, that is loving devotional service. So that is the definition given by Srila Narad Muni. He says, Sarvopadhi vinirmuktam tatparatvena nirmalam Hrishikena Hrishikesha Sevanam Bhakti Ruchyate. So the first step in the direction of engaging in loving devotional service of the Lord is the understanding that this external is just a dress, this external body. So vasamsi jirnani yatha vihaya navani grinanti naroparani tatha shariraya vihaya jirnani anyani samyati navani dehi. As Krishna mentions in Bhagavad Gita, that just like as a person gives up his old body, a person takes off his old cloth and puts on a new cloth. Similarly, the living entity gives up the old body and takes on a new body. So this is, as Krishna says, this dhiras tatra na muhyati. Dehinosmin yatha dehe kaumaram yavanam jara tatha dehantaram prapti dhiras tatra na muhyate. So Krishna mentions that because there is the proprietor of the body within the body, there is this childhood, youth, and old age. All these changes are taking place because there is the presence of the part and parcel, the superior part and parcel of Lord within us. That is Jiva Bhuta, the superior part and parcel. And what is the body made up of? The body is inferior part and parcel. So body is made up of earth, water, fire, air, the space, mind, intelligence, and false ego. So the external body with the gross and subtle body. The gross is, so when the body dies, the earth part of the body will become earth, the water part will become water, the fire part will become fire, the air part will become air, and then the space is anyway space. So this is how the body is getting formed, and then the body is getting disintegrated at the time of death. But what is it that causes the formation of body? Striya pravishyam udaram pumsareta kranashraya. So it is mentioned in karmana deva netrena jantur deha upapatti. Striya pravishta udaram pumsareta kranashraya. So it is mentioned in Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam that karmana deva netrena, so the living entities are taking different births under the influence of the activities that the living entities have been doing since time immemorial. So if the activity is being done, if pious activities are being done, the living entity are getting good results, and the living entities are able to have a better time in the material world. If the activities are impious, are harming others, then the living entities are getting the repercussions in the similar way as the good activities give repercussions, the bad activities will also give repercussions. And this is the E Rupe Brahmanda Brahmite Kono Bhagavān Ji, Guru Krishna Prasad Paye Bhakti Lata Beach. So this is the continuously the living entity has been going in the different species of life. Urdhvam gachanti satvastha madhye tishtanti rajasa jaganya guni vritistha ado gachanti tamasa. So depending on what mode of nature a living entity is in, if a living entity is predominantly in mode of goodness, the living entity is going into the upper planetary system. If living entity is predominantly in the mode of passion, the living entity is staying in the middle planetary system. The living entity is predominantly in the mode of ignorance, adho gachanti tamasa. The living entity is going into the lower planetary systems. So this is there is this constantly, unfortunately, this punarapi jananam punarapi maranam punarapi janani jatare shayanam iha samsare bahu dustarām kripaya pare pahi murare. As Srila Shankaracharya says in Bhaja Govindam, this is the constant unfortunate situation in the conditioned existence in the material world, that one is constantly taking birth and constantly dying, constantly in the womb of innumerable mothers. Punarapi janani jatare shayanam iha samsare bahu dustarām. So it is very difficult to overcome this insurmountable ocean of birth and death, and that's why here it is said dayayed anantaḥ. So the living entities since time immemorial are in this constant cycle of birth and death, but the Supreme Personality of Godhead is constantly accompanying the living entity. That is his dayayed anantaḥ, his compassion that has got no end, the costless mercy, the endless compassion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So therefore we say this He Krishna Karuna Sindho Tina Bandho Jagatpade. So Krishna is addressed as an ocean of mercy. Just like there is an ocean of birth and death, to counteract that ocean of birth and death, the Supreme Personality of Godhead gives ocean of mercy. So He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpade. And he is a friend of all the conditioned, unfortunately conditioned living entities. They are called Dina Bandho Dinanath. So he is even though the living entities are in the conditioned state of existence, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is present as the super soul, the heart of all the living entities. Sarvasya chaham hridisannivishta mattah smritir jnanam apohanam cha. So Krishna mentions in Bhagavad Gita that I am the heart of all the living entities, and from me comes smriti, jnanam, and apohanam, remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. So if a living entity wants to forget the Lord provides all the opportunities to the living entity to forget him, and unfortunately be in the constant cycle of birth and death. But if a living entity wants to remember the Lord provides all the opportunities to the living entity to remember him. And this is the costless mercy that the Lord does not forcefully control any living entity. The Lord is giving the independence to the living entity in terms of what the living entity wants to do. But always the guidance is there. That is the voice of conscience, as we say. So where is that voice of conscience coming from? It is the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the form of Paramatma, who is constantly guiding the living entity. Upadrashta anumanta cha bharta bhokta maheshwara paramatmeti cha apyukto dehesmin purusha para. As Krishna mentions in Bhagavad Gita. So he is the overseer. So in all the living entities, he is overseeing their activity. Anumanta, and he is permitting. So if a living entity is adamant to do a particular action, the Lord is giving the permission. So what is happening is the example that is given is that of a small child wanting to do some mischievous activities. So the parents would actually say to the child that don't do this. But if the child is adamant and wants to do this, the child might not listen to the parents and anyway do what the child wants to do. So then what happens? Whatever the mischievous activity the child did, the child has to suffer the consequences of that. Maybe take an example that someone is at a small child at a higher place, at a height, and the parent says, don't climb there, and if you climb there and fall, you'll break your bones. And the child doesn't listen and anyway does that and breaks the bones. So there is the guidance that is given by the parent, but the child does not listen and the child suffers the consequence. So this is the unfortunate situation in this conditioned material universe, that there are all these are Krishna says aham bija prada pita sarva yonishu kaunteya murteya sambhavanti aham tasam brahma mahadyonir aham bija prada pita. Krishna says that all the living entities in this whole universe, their seed giving father is me and the material nature is the mother. So the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the father of all the living entities in that respect, and he is present in the form of the super soul, all the living entities, every moment guiding the living entity. So every moment, according to what the living entity's desire is, helping them to go in that direction. Even though the living entity sometimes, or unfortunately in most of the times, because of being in the conditioned existence, is enamored by the whole material glamour. So therefore, mood mamebhya paramavyayam. So naham prakasha sarvasya yoga maya samavrita modoyam nabhi chanati. So Krishna mentions in Bhagavad Gita that he is not he does not reveal himself to everyone. The revelation of the Lord happens according to the surrender of the person, of the devotee. So ye yatha mam prapadyante tam stataiva bhajamyam mama vartamano vartante manushya partha sarvasha. So as Krishna mentions in Bhagavad Gita, that whatever way one is surrendering onto the Lord actually says that tam stataiva bhajamyam. So this is again the dayayed anantaḥ. If you look at that first line, that is the costless and infinite mercy of the Lord, where he is he is totally Yeme bhakta janapartha neme bhaktascha te jana mad bhaktanam cha ye bhakta same bhakta tamomata. So Krishna mentions in the Adi Purana, Krishna says that those who are my devotees are not actually my devotees. The devotee of my devotee is actually my devotee. So this is when one is totally in the surrendered state of mind, one sees that everything is based on the Lord's energy, and that way one sees the Lord everywhere, because as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu mentions, achintya bheda bheda tattva, simultaneously one and different. So simultaneously one, because ekadesha sthitasya agnir jyotsya vistarini yatha parasya brahmana shaktir tathedam akhilam jagat. As it is mentioned in the Vedas, just like the fire is situated at one place, but it distributes its heat and light everywhere. And the biggest ball of fire is the sun. We can get that. So the sun is at one place, far, far away, but it distributes its light and heat and energy to all the planets in the solar system, for example. Parasya Brahmana Shaktir Tadedam Akhilam Jagat. Similarly, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is Goloka Eva Nivasati Akhilatma Bhuto. Is present in his Goloka Vrindavan Dham as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, bhagavān. Vadanti tat tato vidas tattvam yadhyanam advayam brahmeti paramatmeti bhagavān iti shabdyate. So the Supreme Personality of Godhead is realized in three phases. One is the Brahman aspect, the other is the Paramatma aspect, and the third is the Bhagavan aspect. The Brahman aspect is the aspect that Sarvam Khalvidam Brahman. That is the rays of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that is Hiranmayena Patrena Satyasya Pahita Mukham Tattvam Pusham Apavruno Satya Dharmaya Drishtaye. This is mentioned in Sri Yushopanishad, where it is said that the devotee is praying to the Supreme Personality of Godhead that, "O Lord, please remove your glaring effulgence so that we can see your transcendental, divine, beautiful face." So the realization, undifferentiated Brahman realization, that is the first. Then there is Paramatma realization, the localized aspect of the Lord, who is present in the heart of all the living entities. That is Paramatma. And then the realization of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Bhagavan. Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. Ite chamsha kalaha pumsa Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. Indrari Vyakulam Lokam Mudhrayanti Yuge Yuge. As it is mentioned in Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, all the incarnations of the Lord are said, and then it says that all these are the portions or the plenary portions of this person. And who is this person? Krishna. And who is he? The Supreme Personality of Godhead. Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. Indrari Vyakulam Lokam Mudhrayanti Yuge Yuge. So whoever are the enemies of the demigods and the saintly living entities, whenever they are distressed, the Supreme Personality of Godhead personally advents, he ascends. So this is as Krishna says, Yada Yada Hi Dharmasya Glanir Bharata Abhyutthanam Adharmasya Tadatmanam Srajamyaham Paritranaya Sadhunam Vinashaya Cha Dushkritam Dharma Samsthapanarthaya Sambhavami Yuge Yuge. So this is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, where he comes to protect his devotees, because Sadhavo Hridayam Mahyam Sadhunam Hridayam Toham Madanyat Tena Janati Naham Tebhyo Managapi. As Krishna mentions in Bhagavad Gita, that he says that I am in the heart of devotees, and in my heart the devotees are present. They do not know anything other than me, and I do not know anything other than them. It's that reciprocal love of a pure devotee to the Lord is that is the basis of everything that happens in this whole universe. Because if that love, the pure love for the Lord, is not there in the devotees, then there is no existence. Or every other basis of the existence is based on this pure love. So this is what we understand, dayayed anantaḥ. Then we go to the next line of the verse, sarvātmanāśrita-pado yadi nirvyalīkam. As it is mentioned, sarvātmanāye sharanam sharanyam gato mukundam parihritya kartum. So this sarvātmana verse is mentioned in another verse in Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. Devarshi bhutapta nrunam pitranam na kinkaram nayam runicha rajan sarvātmanāye sharanam sharanyam gato mukundam parihritya kartum. So very beautiful verse where it is said that all types of debts are taken away when one is surrendered onto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Actually, when a living entity is taking birth, immediately the living entity is indebted, because indebted first of all to the parents. The parents are giving the birth, the human form of life, which is the most valuable form of life in this whole universe. So immediately indebted to the parent. Then nrunam pitranam, to the pitras, to the forefathers, to the deva rishis, devas and rishis, demigods and all the saintly persons. Devarshi bhutapta, all the living entities, to the parents, to the forefathers, nrunam pitranam, na kinkaram nayam runicha rajan. No, he is not indebted to anyone. Why? Sarvātmanāye sharanam sharanyam gato mukundam parihritya kartam. When one is surrendered onto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is Sarvatma. Sarvatma is another name of Paramatma. The super soul is present as in the heart of all the living entities. So he is called Sarvatma. And he is also Paramatma, the super soul. Sarvatmanaye sharanam sharanyam. So when one is surrendered onto to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, gato mukundam parihritya kartam. All the debt that one has is taken off. So that is sarvātmanāśrita-pado yadi nirvyalīkam. Then the third line is te dustarām atitaranti deva-māyāṁ. So this ocean of birth and death is that's why it is called ocean of birth and death, bhava sagar. So this bhava sagar is, bhava means the constant cycle of birth and death, and sagar is the ocean. So this is, it says, te dustarām atitaranti deva-māyāṁ. So one can overcome. So as Krishna says, janma karmam cha me divyam evam yo veti tatvatah tyaktva deham punarjanmam naiti mameti so Arjuna. So when one understands the divine nature of Krishna's birth and Krishna's activities, me divyam evam yo veti tatvatah, one knows this in truth. Tyaktva deham punarjanmam naiti. Such a person does not get another body in this material world. Then what happens to such a person? Mameti so Kaunteya. Mameti so Arjuna. So Krishna mentions to Arjuna that such a person comes back to me. This is the transcendental position of remembering the divine birth and pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And if you look at it from the perspective of the appearance of Narasimha, his birth was from the pillar. So this is the transcendental position of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that he is not subjected to any material loss. So, Devi yeṣāṁ gunamayi mama maya duratyaya mameva ye prapadyante mayam etam tarantite. So the Maya is subservient to the Lord. This is the transcendental position of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The living entities are subjugated to the material energy of the Lord, because the living entities are anu. They are the example that Srila Prabhupada generally gives is like a spark of the fire coming out of the fire. So the spark of the fire, its value lies in being with the fire. But if the spark goes out of the fire, it loses its existence, literally. If the spark is going out of the fire, it has lost its existence. But if the spark is within the fire, it is fire. There's no difference between the spark and the fire. So this is when one is connecting oneself to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one is in one's original state of existence, which is full of knowledge, full of the existence itself is there, and bliss. Satchidananda Vigraha. So Krishna is Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchidananda Vigraha. Anadir Adir Govinda Sarva Karana Karana. So Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he is an embodiment of truth, eternality, and bliss. Anadir Adir Govinda. He himself does not have any beginning, but he is the beginning of everything else. This is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So we keep going back, and we reach the place where this person has not got any origin, and that is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So every time when we go back, we can see that they have got a father and a mother. They got someone descendant, and then when we reach a descendant place where there is no further descendant to them, that is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But then this is the greatness of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that even though he is fully satisfied within himself. Atma ramascha munaya nigrantapi urukrame kurvanti ahetukim bhaktim itham bhuta guno hari. This is also mentioned about a person who is totally surrendered onto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They are just blissful within themselves. They do not know, they do not want anything else. That is the qualification of a person who has totally surrendered onto the Lord. So that person is sa shantim apnoti na kamakami. Apuryamanam achalam pratishtam samudram apa pravishanti yadvat tadvat kamayam pravishanti sarve sa shantim apnoti na kamakami. As Krishna mentions in Bhagavad Gita, why does a person who is totally surrendered onto the Lord does not get influenced by all these material things or material inputs that the person gets through the senses? Because the person is totally satisfied within oneself. That is called Atma Rama. Totally, one knows that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is present and is there everywhere in the form of his energy. So this is what Krishna says: Mam chayo avyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatite tan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. So and that is really important, the importance of avyabhicharini bhakti. What does avyabhicharini bhakti means? That it is the devotional service that is constant, that is not hindered by anything. That is what is ahaituki apratihata. Savai pumsam paro dharmo yato bhaktir adhokshaje ahaituki apratihatas yayatma suprasidati. Very beautiful verse in Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, where it is said that that is the highest goal of existence in human form of life. What? Parodharma, the supreme occupational duty. What is it? That is yato bhaktir adhokshaje, the rendering loving devotional service to the Lord who cannot be understood by the blunt material eyes, who cannot be seen by the blunt material eyes. Adha krita akshaja. So akshaja is eyes, and one who cannot be seen by the blunt material eyes. So how does one see the Lord? Premanjana churita bhakti vilochanena. Santa sadaiva videshu vilekyanti yam shyama sundaram achintya gunaswarupam govinda madipurusham tamaham bhajami. So it is mentioned in Brahma Samhita how one can see the Lord when one anoints the eyes with a salve of love for the Lord. So what does that mean? Anointing the eyes with salve of love for the Lord. It means when one is in remembrance of the divine pastimes of the Lord, and one knows that those pastimes are happening at every moment. All the unlimited pastimes of the Lord are happening simultaneously at every moment. And it's just a matter of one remembering that and being in that perspective, being in that situation, just being able to remember those pastimes of the Lord. And when one is in that state, that is avyabhicharini bhakti, because it is the mind that is the most important aspect of the presence of our So we can be present physically at many places, but if our mind is not present at that place, we are not present, even though physically we might be present in the form of the body. So therefore, and this is what is the Ramya Kachit Upasana Vrajavadhu Argenava Kalpita, as it is mentioned by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. The gopis of Vrindavana, they were the householders. They were housewives. They were looking after their family. But even while they were doing that, their mind was always thinking about what is Krishna doing at this time. What is Krishna doing at this time? So the mind was always thinking of Krishna. They were physically doing lots of different things, but their mind was always on Krishna. That is Avyabhicharani Bhakti. That is that constantly remembering the Lord, the lotus feet of the Lord. And when that happens, te dustarām atitaranti cha deva-māyāṁ. So as Krishna mentions in Bhagavad Gita, Daivi Hesha Gunamayi Mama Maya Duratyaya Mameva ye prapadyante Maya metam tarantite. Krishna says that my material energy is very difficult to overcome. That is the dustarām. But Mameva ye prapadyante Maya metam tarantite. When one surrenders onto the Supreme Personality of God, and Krishna actually says Eva. And it is that is really important. Only. Mam eva ye prapadyante Maya metam tarantite. Of course, some people might say that this is being dogmatic, but this is the scripture. When we want to understand something transcendental, we just like if we want to see some organisms, microorganisms, which cannot be seen with the normal eye, we use microscope and other instruments, and then we actually see that. Similarly, the Shastra or the Vedas, Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita, Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, they provide those divine eyes to us through which we can enter the realm of divinity. So it cannot be seen through the blunt material eyes, but when we try and absorb these verses, for example, the verse that is here, then we'll be able to be in that state of mind where we can remember the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And the last verse is naiṣāṁ mamāham iti dhīḥ śva-śṛgāla-bhakṣye. And this naiṣāṁ, there is a beautiful verse that Sri Prahlad Maharaj says, naiṣāṁ matistava kramangrim sparshati yad anartha pagaumo yadartha mahi yeṣāṁ padarajobhishekam nishkinchananam navrinita yavat. So that is this naiṣāṁ mamāham iti dhīḥ śva-śṛgāla-bhakṣye. The same word is used by Srila Prahlad Maharaj. So there he says in that naiṣāṁ mati tava kramangrim, he says that one cannot have this loving attachment to the lotus feet of the Lord unless one takes bath from the dust of the lotus feet of his devotees. So mahi yeṣāṁ padarajobhishekam nishkinchananam navrinita yavat. So this is the what does it mean? It means that when one is totally in that state of mind where one surrenders onto tadviddhi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya upadyakshanti te jnanam jnaninas tattvadarshina. So when one understands the importance of a person who has surrendered himself to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that is Guru. Tasmat gurum prapadyeta jignasu shreya uttamam shabde parecha nishnatam brahmani upasamāśrayam. So the real spiritual master is a person who has surrendered onto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And because the spiritual master has surrendered onto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he can guide, the spiritual master can guide the other living entities in terms of their own surrender onto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Of course, it is guidance, but the actual walk on the path of liberation back home, back to Godhead, has to be done by the living entities themselves. Therefore, jignasu shreya uttamam, the qualification that is mentioned for The disciple should be inquisitive, jignasu. The disciple should be shreya, means one who understands the ultimate benefit of engaging in loving devotional service, and the disciple should be uttamam, should go in the direction of understanding the transcendental state of existence, udgata tamam. So this material world is unfortunately predominantly in the mode of passion and ignorance. That is the nature of the material world. So somehow or other, if the living entity can remember the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in that state of remembrance, in that state of hearing and chanting and remembering, Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu, Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu, Smaranam Padasevanam. So it's the 9 kinds of devotional service that Sri Prahlad Maharaj mentions. So he says that first, one hears about the Lord. When he's hearing, then the more one hears, the more one can speak about the Lord. Kirtanam. About who? Vishnu, Krishna. Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu. Then when there is hearing and chanting, there is Smaranam. One is remembering the Lord. Smaranam. Then when there is hearing, chanting, and remembering, Padasevanam. One is rendering the service to the lotus feet of the Lord. Then Archanam. One is giving the flowers to the lotus feet of the Lord. Vandanam. One is saying the prayers to the Lord. Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam. One is becoming the servant of the Lord. Sakhyam. One is becoming the friend of the Lord. Atmanivedanam. One is doing total surrender onto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And the example given of that is Bali Maharaj. Bali Maharaj, grandson of Prahlad Maharaj. So he is reigning the world, and Krishna comes in as Vamana avatar, the dwarf Brahmana. And he asks for 3 steps of land from Bali Maharaj. His guru Shukracharya. So here we see that sometimes a guru can be in terms of the spirit. It's not a spiritual master, then it is a material master. So Shukracharya was the material master, not the spiritual master of Bali Maharaj, because Shukracharya was advising Bali Maharaj to not surrender onto Vamanadev. Yeah. Because he was saying that he'll take away everything from you. And this is Krishna mentions in Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam as well. Yasyaham anugrahanami harishye tad dhanam shanai. Tato dhanam tyajanti asya swajano dukkha dukkhitam. So this is the transcendental mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That when he is giving special mercy, he is making the devotee totally dependent on him. And in that total dependence, the remembrance becomes this avyabhicharani bhakti comes. This is the transcendental position of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that he, according to the level of surrender of the devotee, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is giving them the realizations. The realizations are like Srimati Kunti Devi. She says, Vipada santu tashashvat tatra tatra jagat guru bhavato darshanam yatsyad apunar bhava darshanam. So she actually is saying that let these calamities keep befalling on me, Krishna. Why? Because you're personally present with us when these calamities are befalling. And we see that in Mahabharata. Whenever all these calamities were befalling on Pandavas, Krishna personally was there with them, protecting them. So she says that because when we see your lotus feet, bhavato darshanam yatsyat apunar bhava darshanam, then we do not see the constant cycle of birth and death. So this is the wonderful verse of today. Yeṣāṁ sa yeṣa bhagavān dayayed anantaḥ sarvātmanāśrita-pado yadi nirvyalīkam te dustarām atitaranti deva-māyāṁ naiṣāṁ mamāham dhīḥ śva-śṛgāla-bhakṣye. But anyone who is specifically favored by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, due to unalloyed surrender unto the service of the Lord, can overcome insurmountable ocean of illusion and can understand the Lord. But those who are attached to this body, which is meant to be eaten at the end by dogs and jackals, cannot do so. So this is a very beautiful verse. If we can somehow or other concentrate on the meanings of this verse, we can always remember the Supreme Personality of Godhead. With that, I would like to conclude this discussion. Thank you very much for listening. Jai Bhageshwar Dham, Jai Shri Radha Krishnan Ji. Thank you very much for your comment. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Namo Vishnu Padaya, Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale, Śrīmade Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine. Namaste Saraswate Deve, Gauravani Pracharine, Nirvishesha Shunyavadi, Pashyada Deshatarine. Sarvam Shri Krishnarpanamastu, Krishna Matirastu, Hare Krishna. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.